Nathan Cole drove into his reserved parking space like a man who had forgotten how a steering wheel worked. The nose of his black Range Rover stopped crooked over the white line. Morning sunlight flashed across the windshield, sharp enough to make him wince. His head throbbed. His mouth tasted like stale champagne and expensive mistakes. For a moment he sat there with both hands on the wheel, eyes half closed, trying to pull himself back into the kind of body that could walk into an office and be called CEO without anyone laughing. 4 nights at the Aurelia Hotel had left him hollowed out and feverish. 4 nights with Scarlett Hayes, his executive assistant, in the penthouse suite above Midtown, with the blinds closed, room service trays piling up outside the door, and his phone switched off because he had told himself he deserved one weekend without pressure. He had called it a business emergency. He had called it a negotiation retreat. He had called it anything except what it was. Now the city had returned to him in hard, unforgiving detail. Cold pavement. Glass towers. Commuters moving fast with coffees in hand. The bronze letters above the entrance of Coleridge Capital catching the pale winter light. Nathan pushed open the car door and stepped out. His knees felt loose. He smoothed his wrinkled dress shirt, buttoned his jacket, and started toward the building that had made him famous. Then he stopped. The revolving doors were locked. Across the glass, 2 wide strips of yellow notice tape formed a hard X. A white legal notice had been taped to the center panel, its black letters so crisp they seemed to cut into the glass. Court-ordered asset freeze. Do not enter. Nathan stared at the words until they stopped looking like English. For a few seconds he genuinely believed he had walked up to the wrong building. Coleridge Capital occupied 3 floors of this tower. He had signed the lease himself. He had stood in this lobby 6 years earlier, grinning for a photo beneath the company logo, telling reporters that he was proof America still rewarded hunger, intelligence, and nerve. But there was no receptionist behind the desk. No analysts swiping badges. No junior associates hurrying in with laptops and protein shakes. The lobby was dim. The security guard avoided his eyes. Mr. Cole. The voice came from his left. Nathan turned slowly. Daniel Park, his chief of staff, stood near the curb holding a cardboard box. His tie was loose. His usually neat hair looked as if he had run his hands through it too many times. The box in his arms contained a framed award, a stainless steel tumbler, a stack of business cards, and the small desk plant Nathan had always ignored. Daniel looked at him with something Nathan had never seen from an employee before. Pity. Daniel, Nathan said. His own voice came out dry and cracked. What the hell is this? Why is there a court notice on my doors? Who authorized this? Daniel swallowed. Mr. Cole, he said carefully. I'm sorry. Sorry. Nathan barked a laugh that sounded almost insane. My company is sealed shut and you're sorry? Where is Evelyn? Where is the legal team? Get Rebecca on the phone. Get the bank on the phone. Get someone on the phone. Daniel's face tightened. Evelyn isn't here. Then call her. I can't. What do you mean you can't? Daniel looked down at the box, then back at Nathan. Mrs. Whitmore passed away 2 days ago. The cold hit Nathan before the meaning did. What? Margaret Whitmore, Daniel said, voice lower now. Your mother-in-law. Evelyn's mother. She died at Lenox Hill on Saturday afternoon. Evelyn handled the hospital, the funeral arrangements, everything. Alone. Nathan's lips parted, but no sound came out. Daniel forced himself to continue. After that, Whitmore Global withdrew its entire position from Coleridge Capital. The withdrawal triggered the buyback clause and the bank covenants. Lenders froze the accounts. Creditors filed emergency motions. The court appointed a receiver yesterday. The building was sealed this morning. Nathan could hear traffic moving behind him. A horn. A bus braking. A woman laughing into a phone somewhere on the sidewalk. Normal sounds from a normal city, continuing as if the ground had not just vanished beneath his feet. No, he said. It was a small word. Ridiculous. Useless. Daniel said nothing. No, Nathan repeated louder. That's not possible. Evelyn would have called me. Margaret would have. He stopped because the memory rose at once. His phone powered down on the marble nightstand, Scarlett's manicured hand pushing it farther away, her lips brushing his ear as she whispered, "Let the world wait." The world had not waited. "Where is Evelyn?" Nathan asked. "Gone." "Gone where?" "Zurich, I think. Maybe London. No one here knows for sure. She left with Mrs. Whitmore's ashes." Nathan looked from Daniel to the sealed doors, then back again. His mind tried to arrange the facts into something less impossible. Margaret dead. Evelyn gone. Coleridge frozen. Banks pulling out. Court receiver. His phone off. 4 nights in a hotel suite with Scarlett while everything burned. His stomach lurched. "You're lying," he said. Daniel's expression finally hardened. "I wish I were." 3 months earlier, Evelyn Whitmore had carried a lunch bag through the executive floor of Coleridge Capital and smiled at people who no longer bothered to smile back. The bag was insulated navy blue, the kind used by people who cared enough to keep food warm instead of ordering something through an app. Inside were 3 glass containers: poached salmon with lemon, roasted vegetables with very little oil, and a small pot of ginger rice porridge because Nathan's stomach had been acting up again. A separate tin held almond shortbread for Margaret, who had almost no appetite these days but still accepted cookies if Evelyn baked them herself. Nathan was at his desk when Evelyn entered. His office looked down over Park Avenue, all steel, leather, and glass. 2 screens were filled with market charts. A third displayed an unread deck from a renewable infrastructure fund that Nathan had promised his board he could close by the end of the quarter. He did not look up. "Lunch," Evelyn said softly, setting the bag on the corner of his desk. "And your antacid is in the second drawer on the left. Please don't drink coffee on an empty stomach again. His fingers kept moving across the keyboard. "Mom's cardiologist called this morning. Her numbers were a little unstable. I'm going to Greenwich after this to sit with her. I packed the cookies she likes." "Good," he said, still not looking at her. "Tell her I'm buried in work. I'll call later." Evelyn waited. The old Nathan would have noticed that pause. The old Nathan would have looked up and asked if she was all right. The old Nathan, the man who had once stood outside her tiny apartment in a borrowed suit and promised he would spend the rest of his life proving he deserved her, would have reached for her hand. This Nathan only frowned at the screen. "Anything else?" he asked. Before Evelyn could answer, the office door opened without a knock. Scarlett Hayes entered with a tablet pressed to her chest and a paper cup of coffee in her other hand. Her perfume arrived first, warm and sharp, the sort of scent that filled a room and dared anyone to object. She wore a cream blazer that fit too perfectly to be accidental, a silk blouse, and heels that clicked once against the floor before sinking into the rug. "Sorry, Nathan," Scarlett said, though she did not sound sorry. "The Everpoint revisions came in, and I thought you'd want them before the 10 o'clock call." Then her eyes shifted to Evelyn. "Oh, Mrs. Cole. I didn't realize you were here." Evelyn had never taken Nathan's last name publicly, but Scarlett called her Mrs. Cole whenever she wanted to remind Evelyn what little space she occupied in Nathan's world. "Scarlett," Evelyn said. Scarlett moved to Nathan's side and placed the coffee exactly where his hand would reach for it first. To make room, she slid Evelyn's lunch bag toward the edge of the desk. Nathan finally looked up. He picked up the coffee and took a sip. "Perfect," he said. "You remembered." Scarlett smiled. 3 sugars, no cream, hot enough to survive your meetings. Evelyn's fingers curled once against her palm. "You're lucky," Scarlett said, turning toward her. "Not every wife has time to bring lunch in the middle of the day. But honestly, Nathan barely eats anymore. He and I practically live in conference rooms. We order in, argue with lawyers, fix disasters. You know how it is." Evelyn met her eyes. Scarlett's smile did not move, but something in it sharpened. The sentence sounded harmless. It was not. It drew a line down the center of the room. On one side stood Scarlett, the woman with access badges, red-lined contracts, late-night calls, and Nathan's full attention. On the other stood Evelyn, carrying salmon and cookies like a housewife who had wandered onto the wrong floor. "I do know how it is," Evelyn said. For the first time, Scarlett faltered. Nathan had already returned to the tablet. "Eve, I've got to focus. We'll talk tonight." They would not talk tonight. Evelyn knew that before he said it. She nodded, picked up the lunch bag before it could slide off the desk, and placed it back in the center where she had left it. Then she walked out. The door closed behind her on Scarlett's laugh. In the elevator, Evelyn watched her reflection in the brushed steel doors. She wore a cream sweater, dark slacks, no jewelry beyond her wedding ring. Her hair was pinned loosely at the back of her neck. There was nothing about her that suggested private aircraft, Swiss accounts, voting trusts, or the kind of boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made before breakfast. That had once been the point. Margaret Whitmore, one of the most private and ruthless investors of her generation, had raised her only daughter to understand two things. Power attracted parasites, and love that depended on ignorance was not love. When Evelyn had fallen for Nathan Cole, a brilliant scholarship kid from Ohio with more ambition than money, Margaret had not stopped her. She had simply watched. She had given Nathan his first serious seed capital through a quiet investment vehicle. She had opened a few doors, introduced him to a few people, and allowed the industry to believe Colebridge Capital was a hungry young firm backed by an eccentric independent investor named Margaret Whitmore. Nathan knew Margaret had money. He knew she had connections. He did not know she controlled Whitmore Global through a family trust that stretched across real estate, energy, infrastructure, logistics, and private equity on 3 continents. He did not know Evelyn was the sole heir. Evelyn had hidden it because she had wanted one thing in her life that was not purchased, negotiated, or inherited. Nathan had wanted a wife who made a home for him, who kept his life soft while he fought for greatness in the market. She had loved him enough to give him that. 3 years later, she understood the difference between giving someone peace and giving someone permission to become cruel. In the garage, she sat in her modest white Volvo and did not start the engine. Instead, she opened the glove compartment and removed an old black phone with a scratched case and no contacts under real names. She entered a long password. One encrypted app appeared on the screen. There was only one active chat. Evelyn typed, "Find everything on Scarlett Hayes. Before Colebridge. Any previous connection to Nathan. Hotel records, travel overlaps, expense anomalies, outside companies, payments. Last 3 months first." A reply came within seconds. Understood. Evelyn powered the phone down, placed it back where it belonged, and looked at herself in the rearview mirror. There were no tears in her eyes. Only a stillness she recognized from her mother. A week later, Evelyn drove to the Whitmore estate in Greenwich with lilies in the passenger seat and cookies cooling in a tin. The house sat behind iron gates and old maple trees, built of gray stone and softened by decades of ivy. It looked less like a mansion than a private clinic that had decided to become beautiful. A cardiology nurse lived on the grounds. A doctor visited twice a week. Margaret hated all of it and tolerated it only because Evelyn asked. She found her mother in the sunroom, wrapped in a cashmere blanket beside the windows. Winter light lay thin and silver across her white hair. "There you are," Margaret said, opening her eyes. "Here I am." Evelyn kissed her cheek and set the lilies in a vase. "How are you feeling?" "Like a woman whose daughter thinks cookies can replace honest answers." Evelyn smiled despite herself. "That bad?" "Worse." "Sit down." Evelyn sat on the ottoman near her chair and took her hand. Margaret's fingers were cool and delicate, the skin almost translucent. It frightened Evelyn every time. "Nathan didn't come," Margaret said. "He's working. The Everpoint deal is complicated." "Evelyn." It was not a scolding. It was worse. It was the voice Margaret used when a negotiation had already ended, and the other side simply did not know it yet. Evelyn lowered her eyes. Margaret studied her face for a long moment. "I am old enough to know when a woman is protecting the person who is hurting her. I am also old enough to tell you it never ends well. I'm handling it." "Are you?" "I will." Margaret's thumb brushed the back of her hand. "The revised trust documents are complete. Rebecca has them. Arthur has the operational authority prepared. If anything happens to me, Whitmore Global answers to you and only you. Not Nathan. Not his board. Not the people who think silence means weakness." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Evelyn said too quickly. Margaret smiled, tired but amused. That is not how hearts work, darling. Evelyn's throat tightened. Listen to me, Margaret said. Money is not dignity. But without some form of power, dignity becomes expensive to defend. I gave you the first. You must decide when to use it for the second. Evelyn bent her head and pressed her mother's hand to her cheek. I just wanted a normal life. Then have one. But do not confuse normal with small. And do not make yourself small for a man who mistakes your restraint for dependence. That afternoon after Margaret slept, Evelyn stepped outside to take a call on the black phone. The encrypted file arrived in pieces. Scarlett Hayes had once been Scarlett Miller, a student volunteer at an entrepreneurship conference in Boston where Nathan, then broken furious with the world, had given a pitch no investor wanted to hear. They had dated for 5 months. Scarlett had left him when she concluded ambition did not pay rent. 2 years later, after Nathan appeared in a magazine profile as the founder of Coleridge Capital, Scarlett rebranded herself with a polished resume, a London internship of questionable substance, and a talent for appearing exactly where Nathan would notice her. The file included hotel entries, dinner reservations, rideshare logs, and photos from security cameras. The pattern was not emotional ambiguity. It was deliberate, habitual betrayal. The last section was better. Scarlett had opened 3 shell vendors that billed Coleridge for consulting services and market intelligence. The invoices were small enough to avoid attention and regular enough to create a pipeline. More troubling were internal documents she had accessed outside her authorization level, then forwarded to an encrypted account. Evelyn read the file twice. Then she deleted it. Not because she wanted it gone, but because the people who had gathered it had copies stored where Scarlett and Nathan would never reach them. She leaned against the cold side of her car and looked up at the flat white ceiling of the garage. So it wasn't only the marriage, she murmured. It was the company too. That evening, she met Rebecca Chase at a private law office near Bryant Park. Rebecca was in her 50s, silver-haired, precise, and almost impossible to intimidate. She had represented Margaret for 20 years and had known Evelyn since she was young enough to color in the margins of contract drafts. You're certain? Rebecca asked after Evelyn finished. Yes. Divorce, asset protection, criminal exposure, or all of the above? Prepare for all of the above. Quietly. I want 3 routes. Settlement if he cooperates. Litigation if he doesn't. Full enforcement if the financial misconduct is what I think it is. Rebecca's eyes sharpened. And Margaret? She doesn't need to know until she has to. Her heart can't take it. Evelyn. No. Evelyn's voice was gentle, but it closed the subject. I will not let him break my mother before I remove him from my life. Rebecca leaned back, studying her. Then we do this properly. Evidence preserved, chain of custody clean, no emotional shortcuts. If we move too early, he gets a warning. If we move too late, he may move assets beyond reach. I know. Do you? Because once this starts, it won't be a domestic argument. It will be a demolition. Evelyn looked at the framed skyline behind Rebecca's desk. Good, she said. I'm tired of living inside something rotten and calling it a home. For the next several weeks, nothing visible changed. Nathan came home less. When he did, he smelled of whiskey, hotel soap, and Scarlett's perfume. He answered Evelyn's questions with irritation, as if marriage were a minor shareholder who asked too many questions during a board meeting. Scarlett grew bolder. Late-night calls. Photos posted from client dinners where her shoulder rested too close to Nathan's. A quote shared on social media about successful men outgrowing insecure women. Evelyn did not confront her. She brought Margaret soup. She met Rebecca. She read reports on the black phone. She signed documents. She watched the position of every piece on the board. She was waiting for Nathan to step where he could not step back. He did it on a Thursday afternoon. Evelyn was in the Greenwich sunroom with Margaret, cutting an apple into thin slices, when Margaret's phone rang. Nathan's name appeared on the screen. Margaret answered on speaker because her hands were tucked beneath the blanket. Mom, Nathan said, using the name with easy entitlement. I wanted to let you know I have to fly to Seattle tonight. Emergency with the North Line infrastructure bid. Scarlett is coming because she has the diligence files. We'll be gone 3 or 4 days. Margaret's eyes lifted to Evelyn. Seattle, Margaret said. I thought Northline's legal points were settled last month. They reopened a technical covenant. It's a mess. I need to handle it in person. Nathan sounded impatient. Eve will keep an eye on you. I'll call when I land. Take care of yourself, Margaret said. He hung up first. Evelyn kept cutting the apple. Her hand did not shake. He told you? Margaret asked. He texted me 10 minutes ago. And you believe him? The apple peel broke. Evelyn set down the knife. I believe he thinks I will. Margaret closed her eyes. Pain moved over her face deeper than illness. Darling, if this is what I think it is, do not protect me from the truth by letting him keep hurting you. Evelyn smiled, but her eyes burned. Rest. I'll handle everything. She waited until Margaret fell asleep. Then she walked outside, sat in her car, and turned on the black phone. The message was already waiting. No flights purchased to Seattle under Nathan Cole or Scarlett Hayes. No rail or charter booking. Both checked into the Aurelia Hotel in Midtown at 2:14 p.m. penthouse suite. 4 nights, Nathan Cole card on file. A grainy lobby image showed Nathan's hand at Scarlett's lower back as they crossed the marble floor. Scarlett's face was tilted up toward him, laughing. Evelyn looked at the picture for a long time. Then she called Arthur Nolan, Margaret's oldest lieutenant and the operating head of Whitmore Global. Arthur, she said, start phase 1. There was no hesitation on the other end. Today. Now. Draft the formal redemption notice for every Whitmore-related vehicle invested in Coalbridge. Prepare the transfer of my personal Coalbridge shares to the Whitmore Foundation for $1. Freeze any discretionary support. Notify Rebecca that we may need to accelerate. Understood. And Arthur. Yes, Miss Whitmore. Do not give Nathan advance warning. I would not insult you by suggesting it. Evelyn ended the call and watched her breath fog the windshield. Nathan had bought 4 nights. She would use every hour. The catastrophe arrived sooner than strategy allowed. On the second afternoon of Nathan's stay at the Aurelia, Evelyn sat in Rebecca's office reviewing the final language of the redemption notice. Her daily phone, the one Nathan knew, lay face up beside the contract. It rang. Unknown number. Local. Something inside her went still. She answered. Is this Evelyn Whitmore? A woman asked, brisk and professional. This is Lenox Hill Hospital. Your mother, Margaret Whitmore, was brought in by ambulance 30 minutes ago after acute cardiac distress at her home. She is in emergency surgery. You need to come immediately. Evelyn stood so fast her chair struck the wall. The office blurred. I'm coming, she said, though she could barely hear herself. Rebecca was already on her feet. I'll drive. In the elevator, Evelyn called Nathan. The call went straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. She sent a text. My mother is in emergency care. It's serious. Call me now. No reply. She called the Aurelia. The front desk refused to connect her without guest approval. She called Scarlett. Nothing. She called Nathan again and again until the screen seemed to burn into her palm. Off. Silent. Gone. Rebecca drove like a woman prepared to argue with traffic laws in court afterward. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat with her seatbelt cutting into her chest, one hand over her mouth, tasting blood because she had bitten the inside of her cheek. Hold on, she whispered, not to Rebecca. Please, Mom. Please hold on. At the hospital, the world became fluorescent light, disinfectant, clipped voices, and the terrible red glow of the words "and surgery" above a pair of closed doors. Evelyn stood beside the wall because sitting felt like surrender. A nurse explained that the caregiver had found Margaret collapsed near the sunroom. The ambulance had arrived quickly, but the cardiac failure had been severe. Evelyn nodded at the right places and understood almost nothing. She kept calling Nathan. Voicemail. She sent one more text. Nathan, she may not survive this. I need you here. No reply. Hours passed without shape. When the surgeon finally came out, his mask hanging loose under his chin, Evelyn knew before he spoke. People always think grief begins with a scream. Sometimes it begins with silence so complete it seems to erase sound from the world. Ms. Whitmore, the doctor said gently, I'm very sorry. We did everything we could. The cardiac failure was too advanced by the time she reached us. Rebecca's hand closed around Evelyn's arm. Evelyn did not fall immediately. She looked past the doctor at the doors, as if Margaret might still walk through them irritated by the fuss. Then a gurney appeared. White sheet. Still outline. A hand visible at the edge. Evelyn made a sound that did not feel human. She reached her mother and folded over that cold hand, pressing it to her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. The apology was not for the doctors. It was not for fate. It was for every lie she had swallowed to keep Margaret calm, every dinner she had attended with a man who no longer deserved her, every day she had believed there would be time to untangle the marriage before it touched her mother. There had not been time. Nathan's phone remained off. By midnight, Evelyn had stopped crying. It frightened Rebecca, that sudden stillness. Evelyn stood beside the hospital bed after the final forms were signed, face pale, eyes rimmed red, spine straight as a blade. Rebecca, she said. Yes. Move to phase 2. Full liquidation. Court filings ready. Notify Arthur. Notify the banks once the redemption notice goes out. I want the covenants triggered properly and publicly. Rebecca inhaled. Evelyn, you don't have to decide tonight. I already decided. Tonight only changed the speed. She took out her daily phone and opened Nathan's messages. Her fingers were steady when she typed. Mom had a major cardiac episode. She is in critical condition at Lenox Hill. Your phone is off. Come immediately when you see this. She looked at the message for one breath. Then she sent it. That, she said quietly, is his last chance. He never took it. For the next 48 hours, Evelyn did what grief did not permit most people to do. She became exact. She arranged Margaret's cremation according to her mother's written wishes. Private, simple, dignified. No society pages. No public memorial for people who had once wanted access to Margaret's money more than her company. Rebecca and Arthur stood with her in a small chapel while winter rain tapped against the windows. Evelyn held the urn afterward with both hands, surprised by its weight and by the warmth that lingered in the stone. At the same time, Whitmore Global moved. The redemption notice landed with the force of a controlled explosion. The Whitmore vehicles demanded the return of capital under the protective clauses Margaret had insisted on when Nathan was too grateful to read them closely. The demand triggered a buyback obligation Coleridge could not meet without its credit lines. The banks, alerted to governance risk and unsupported liquidity, froze discretionary lending. 2 lenders refused rollover. A major counterparty paused settlement. The receiver petition was filed before Nathan's hotel breakfast tray was cleared. By the end of the second day, Coleridge's finance director had called Nathan 76 times. No answer. Scarlett's shell vendors were flagged. Internal access logs were preserved. A packet of evidence went to a private forensic accountant and from there toward the Financial Crimes Bureau. Evelyn also made one call that was not legal strategy so much as moral symmetry. Scarlett's former fiancé came from a family with long memory and longer reach. He had once paid off a debt Scarlett created, only for her to vanish with the settlement and a watch she had not purchased. Evelyn did not threaten him or ask for anything improper. She merely allowed a trusted intermediary to mention that Scarlett Hayes was currently in the Aurelia penthouse with Nathan Cole, and that certain bank accounts connected to her might soon become uncomfortable places to keep money. People who had been waiting years to embarrass Scarlett did not need detailed instructions. On the morning Margaret's body was cremated, Evelyn returned to her apartment on the Upper East Side. She had lived there with Nathan for 3 years. The deed had always been in her name, a wedding gift from Margaret that Nathan had described to friends as our place, as if the word our could erase ownership records. She packed lightly. Documents. Her passport. Margaret's watch. A small photograph of the 2 of them on Lake Como when Evelyn was 11. The black phone. A navy dress. A coat. Nathan's suits hung untouched in the closet. His cufflinks remained in the drawer. His awards, shoes, watches, and the framed magazine cover in which he had called himself self-made stayed where they were. She walked through the apartment once. It was beautiful and cold, all curated art in glass and soft lighting. She remembered choosing the sofa because Nathan said it made him feel successful. She remembered cooking soup in that kitchen while he worked late. She remembered waiting for elevator doors to open and feeling ashamed of the hope that rose in her every time. Then she called building management and changed the locks. On the way to the airport, she sent Nathan one final message. It was a photo of Margaret's temporary memorial marker. No dramatic caption. No accusation. Just one sentence. I'm taking Mom home. Take care of yourself. Then she blocked him. Above the Atlantic, while Nathan slept off champagne and arrogance in the Aurelia penthouse, Evelyn sat beside the urn containing her mother's ashes and looked out at the dark wing of the plane. Her grief had not left. It had simply acquired a direction. Nathan returned to Coalbridge Capital on Monday morning, believing the worst consequence of the weekend might be a headache and a few missed calls. He had turned his phone on in the hotel elevator and watched it light up with numbers so absurd he first assumed a system error. Missed calls from the CFO, Daniel, legal, the bank, Rebecca Chase, Evelyn, until her name stopped appearing because the calls had stopped. Messages stacked over one another. Urgent, call me, where are you? The bank is here, court filing, receiver Margaret, Evelyn is at the hospital, Nathan please answer. He had skimmed none of them properly. Panic made him clumsy. Scarlett had seen the first headlines in a private industry chat and gone pale. By the time he came out of the shower she was packing. What are you doing? He demanded. I have to go. Go where? Away from you. Her voice cracked. Do you understand what she did? Evelyn knows everything. My accounts are frozen. Someone was waiting for me in the lobby yesterday. I'm not going down because you couldn't control your wife. My wife. Nathan grabbed her arm. You said you handled the vendor transfers. You said. Scarlett slapped his hand away. I said a lot of things because you wanted to hear them. Let go of me. She left through the service elevator with sunglasses on and 2 suitcases. At the front desk, she left an envelope for him. Nathan had not opened it yet. He had gone straight to Coalbridge, convinced that once he stood inside his own office, summoned his own lawyers, and raised his voice in his own conference room, the facts would rearrange themselves around his authority. Instead, Daniel stood on the sidewalk with a cardboard box and told him Margaret was dead. Now Nathan's legs weakened so abruptly, he had to catch himself against a concrete planter. Call Evelyn, he said. I don't have a number that works. Then call Rebecca. Rebecca Chase represents Evelyn. She won't speak to you without counsel. I am her husband. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the sealed doors. Not for long, I imagine. The phone in Nathan's hand began to ring. The screen displayed a blocked international number. He answered so fast he nearly dropped it. The video connected. First he saw mountains. Snow-bright peaks beyond tall windows. A room paneled in pale wood and furnished with quiet, old-world luxury. A black marble fireplace. Fresh white flowers in a low bowl. Then the camera shifted and Evelyn appeared. For one disorienting second, Nathan could not connect the woman on the screen to the wife who used to stand in his office with lunch bags and soft reminders. This Evelyn wore a tailored black cashmere suit. Her hair was pulled into a sleek knot. A single pair of pearl earrings caught the light. Her face was calm, refined, almost unreadable. She did not look abandoned. She did not look broken. She looked like someone for whom grief had become armor. Evelyn, he breathed. She regarded him as if he were a minor agenda item. Nathan Cole, she said. Let me introduce myself properly. The sound of his full name made his stomach drop. I am Evelyn Whitmore, sole heir of Margaret Whitmore, chair of the Whitmore Global Executive Committee, and controlling beneficiary of the family trust that supplied the original capital for Coalbridge. Nathan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Your company was never built on your genius alone. The seed funding came from my family. The introductions came from my mother. The apartment you called home is mine. The cars, the credit support, the private investor confidence you wore like a medal. All of it began with people you learned to dismiss the moment you felt powerful enough. Eve, I didn't know. You never asked. Her voice did not rise. That made it worse. Scarlett Hayes, formerly Scarlett Miller, did not enter your life by accident. She was not my creation, but once she returned to you, I allowed her to reveal exactly who you were. Every hotel booking, every unauthorized transfer, every shell invoice, every conversation in which the two of you discussed taking money out of Coalbridge while laughing at my ignorance, has been preserved. Nathan's fingers went numb around the phone. Margaret died while you were in a hotel room with your assistant, and your phone turned off. I sent you one last message from the hospital. You ignored it because you had arranged your world so nothing inconvenient could reach you. Evelyn, please. Do not beg yet. You will need your strength for court. Daniel made a small sound beside him. Nathan realized the volume was high enough for him to hear every word. Evelyn continued. Whitmore Global has redeemed its position. The buyback obligation is active. Your lenders have frozen exposure. A receiver has control of the office. Evidence of financial misconduct has been delivered to the appropriate authorities. Rebecca will serve you with divorce papers and civil claims. Criminal inquiries will proceed separately. Nathan shook his head like an animal refusing a trap already closed. You can't do this. For the first time, Evelyn smiled. It was not warm. I already did. Evelyn, listen to me. I made a mistake. Scarlett. Scarlett is not your problem anymore. You are. He flinched. As for my mother, Evelyn said, and the stillness in her face finally cracked enough for him to glimpse the grief beneath it. I buried her with the dignity you failed to show her in life. You do not get to use her death as a stage for your regret. I loved her, Nathan whispered. You loved what she gave you. There is a difference. The words landed harder than rage would have. From the moment you turned off your phone and walked into that suite, Nathan, you were finished in this city. In this industry. In my life. Eve. Enjoy what you earned. The screen went black. Nathan stood frozen. The dead call reflected in his shattered face. For several seconds no one moved. Then he tried to call the number back. Disconnected. He tried again. Nothing. A sound rose in him, low and raw, then broke into a shout. He hurled the phone at the pavement. It shattered against the curb, glass skittering under the sealed doors of Coalbridge Capital. Daniel stepped back. Nathan sank to his knees. The pavement was cold enough to bite through the fabric of his trousers. He did not feel it. His mind kept replaying Evelyn's face, her voice, the impossible list of titles and facts. The wife he had treated as an accessory had been the foundation under everything. The mother-in-law he had flattered, then avoided, had been the architect of his success. The secretary he had chosen over both of them had been stealing from under his nose while he mistook attention for loyalty. He wanted to rage at Evelyn for being cruel, for hiding, for setting traps. But underneath the rage came another truth, uglier because he could not deny it. No one had forced him to betray her. No one had forced him to turn off his phone. No one had forced him to believe the quiet woman packing his lunch was too harmless to matter. Mr. Cole, Daniel said after a while. Nathan looked up. His face was wet. Daniel's voice was formal now. Final. Court officers will be here soon to inventory the premises. You should leave. Your personal effects are in the box. The box. Nathan crawled toward it before he could stand. Inside were the remains of an empire reduced to desk clutter. Awards. A mug. Dead business cards. A framed photograph from his wedding. He picked it up. In the picture he was laughing, young and invincible. Evelyn stood beside him in a simple white dress, looking at him as if he were worth trusting. Something in him snapped. He smashed the frame against the sidewalk. Glass cracked across Evelyn's face first. Nathan stared at the broken photograph, then covered his mouth with both hands and made a sound closer to choking than crying. Daniel did not comfort him. By noon the sidewalk had grown busy. People glanced over, recognized him slowly, looked again, whispered. Someone took a picture. Nathan saw the phone rise, saw his own ruin reflected in a stranger's screen, and understood what Evelyn had meant. Social death was not a metaphor. It was the moment when the world you performed for finally saw the costume fall apart. He left with the cardboard box under one arm and nowhere to go. At the apartment, the fingerprint reader rejected him. He tried again. Rejected. He punched the code. Rejected. He hit the door with the side of his fist until his knuckles split. "Evelyn," he shouted. "Open the door." "Evelyn." No answer. A neighbor's door opened 2 inches, then closed. 10 minutes later, the building manager arrived with 2 security guards. He was courteous in the way people become courteous when they are fully prepared to call the police. "Mr. Cole," he said. "Ms. Whitmore changed all access permissions yesterday. She provided documentation confirming sole ownership of the unit. You are no longer listed as an authorized resident. I live here. Not according to the owner. My clothes are in there. My things are in there. You may have your attorney contact Ms. Whitmore's attorney to arrange retrieval of personal property." Nathan laughed once wildly. "Where am I supposed to go?" The manager did not answer. That was answer enough. Nathan left the building with the box in his arms, past the doorman who had once greeted him as Mr. Cole with admiration, and now looked at him as if he were a disturbance. His wallet held 3 20s, 2 expired corporate cards, and a black metal card that declined when he tried to book a room at a decent hotel. The bank app would not load. His phone was gone, smashed outside Coalbridge. He borrowed a charger and a phone from a convenience store clerk after paying cash for a cheap replacement device. When he finally accessed his email, the world came crashing down in subject lines. Notice of default. Emergency motion for receiver. Termination of credit facility. Forensic review. Divorce complaint. Demand for preservation of documents. He went to the Aurelia because he needed to see Scarlett, needed to find someone lower than himself to blame. The front desk looked at him with polished neutrality. "Miss Hayes checked out this morning," the clerk said. "Where did she go?" "We cannot disclose guest information." "I paid for that suite." "The account has been settled." "By whom?" "We cannot disclose that information either, sir." The clerk reached beneath the desk and produced a plain envelope. "She did leave this for you." Nathan tore it open with shaking hands. The note was written on hotel stationery in Scarlett's furious, slanted script. "You ruin me. Evelyn knows everything. My accounts are frozen. People are looking for me because of you. Don't come after me. Don't call me. Whatever you did, deal with it yourself." There was no signature. Nathan stood in the lobby where chandeliers glowed above polished marble, holding the note of a woman who had vanished faster than his money. Only then did he understand how thoroughly alone he was. He spent that night in a motel near Penn Station because it was the only place that accepted cash without asking questions. The room smelled of bleach and damp carpet. The heat rattled in the wall. He lay on top of the covers fully dressed, staring at water stains on the ceiling, unable to sleep and unable to think in a straight line. A knock came just before dawn. Not housekeeping. The sound was too measured. Nathan sat up. "Who is it?" "New York Police Department." "Open the door, Mr. Cole." His body went cold. 2 uniformed officers stood outside with a pair of investigators in dark coats. "Nathan Cole?" one of them asked. Nathan nodded because lying to his own name seemed suddenly beyond him. "We're with the Financial Crimes Bureau. We have a subpoena and a request for you to come in for questioning regarding suspected misappropriation of company funds, wire fraud, false vendor invoices, and related matters involving Coalbridge Capital and Scarlett Hayes." "No," Nathan said. "No, Scarlett handled that. Scarlett did it. Evelyn set this up. She's framing me." One investigator looked at him without sympathy. Ms. Whitmore's counsel provided extensive documentation, including authorization records bearing your signature, internal communications, banking trails, and audio recordings. "You can make your statement downtown." "Audio recordings?" The investigator's expression sharpened. "You and Ms. Hayes had a habit of discussing business in hotel rooms. That was unwise." Nathan sat down on the bed because his legs could no longer hold him. The handcuffs were cold when they closed around his wrists. On the way through the motel corridor, a man in a bathrobe opened his door to watch. A woman at the ice machine lifted her phone. Nathan lowered his head, but not before he saw himself reflected in the metal elevator doors. Unshaven, gray-faced, cuffed, wearing the same expensive suit in which he had walked out of the Aurelia believing he could still command a room. Evelyn had not shouted when she destroyed him. She had simply handed the truth to people whose job was to make it official. The questioning lasted for hours. At first, Nathan clung to outrage. He blamed Scarlett. He blamed Evelyn. He blamed the banks, the receiver, the stress of running a company, the pressure of expectations, the confusing overlap between personal and corporate spending. Each explanation sounded weaker when placed beside documents. The investigators had invoice chains, access logs, emails, contract drafts, signed approvals, hotel dates, bank transfers routed through consulting vendors Scarlett controlled. Audio clips of Nathan laughing as he told Scarlett that Evelyn would never understand the structure because she had no head for finance anymore. Another clip captured Scarlett asking what would happen if Margaret withdrew support and Nathan replying, "She won't. Evelyn keeps her tame." He did not remember saying it. The recording remembered for him. By the time his attorney arrived, Nathan had stopped yelling. Scarlett was picked up at JFK the next day while trying to board a flight under a newly booked itinerary. Her lawyer immediately tried to separate her from Nathan. His lawyer tried to separate him from Scarlett. The evidence tied them together with far more loyalty than either had shown in life. The story leaked because stories like that always do. The names were partially shielded in the first trade newsletter, but not enough. Self-made fund founder frozen out after wife revealed as secret backer. Then came gossip accounts. Then message boards. Then old photos of Nathan at charity galas with Evelyn cropped beside Scarlett at a conference table. By the weekend, people Nathan had once called friends were posting vague reflections about humility, loyalty, and the danger of forgetting who helped you climb. His calls went unanswered. Investors who used to return his messages in minutes suddenly needed to speak through counsel. Partners issued statements saying they had no active relationship with Colbridge. Former employees quietly updated their resumes. Recruiters stopped replying. Nathan's mother in Ohio heard from a cousin before Nathan could tell her anything. She called crying, asking if it was true that Margaret was dead, if it was true that he had missed the funeral, if it was true he had cheated on Evelyn and lost the company. Nathan had no answers that did not make him sound worse. "Your father would be ashamed," she said before hanging up. He sat in a holding room afterward, staring at the gray wall, and for the first time felt the word ashamed settle on him not as an accusation, but as a place he now lived. The divorce papers arrived through counsel. Evelyn sought dissolution of the marriage, return of separate property, damages related to misused marital and business assets, and a finding of marital misconduct. The apartment was hers. The personal vehicles were tied to trusts or financing facilities now withdrawn. The accounts he had considered joint were mostly empty or frozen pending review. The assets he had believed were proof of success were either leased, leveraged, or traceable to Whitmore support. He was not being stripped of wealth. He was discovering how little of it had ever truly belonged to him. Weeks became months. Colbridge entered bankruptcy proceedings. The receiver sold what could be sold. The brand itself, once polished and aggressive, became toxic. Employees found other jobs. The office floors were leased to a consulting firm that never knew a man had knelt outside the doors and watched his life collapse. Nathan and Scarlett were indicted on financial charges. Their attorneys negotiated, argued, filed motions, and postured. The documents did not care. In jail, time lost texture. Nathan grew thin. His beard came in unevenly. He replayed the same memories until they wore grooves in his mind. Evelyn placing lunch on his desk. Margaret telling him on the day she wrote the first check, "Remember where the beginning is." Scarlett sliding coffee into his hand. His phone dark on the hotel nightstand. The hospital message he had not seen. He hated Evelyn for the precision of what she had done. He hated Scarlett for running. He hated Daniel for pitying him. He hated the journalists, the banks, the lawyers, the investigators. But in the quiet hours before dawn, when rage ran out of fuel, he hated himself most of all. 6 months after the sealed doors at Coalbridge, Evelyn stood in her office overlooking Lake Zurich and listened to the final legal update without sitting down. The Whitmore Global European headquarters occupied a restored 19th-century building near the water, its old stone exterior concealing a network of glass-walled offices, secure conference rooms, and private elevators. Snow lay along the distant ridges of the Alps. Swans moved across the lake below as if the world had never contained emergency rooms or court notices. Rebecca Chase stood near Evelyn's desk with a folder in hand. "The criminal matter is resolved," Rebecca said. "Nathan accepted the plea. 7 years. Scarlett accepted 5. Restitution orders entered, though collection will be limited. The civil divorce judgment is final. You retain all separate property. No spousal support." The court accepted the misconduct findings. Evelyn nodded. She wore a pearl silk blouse beneath a charcoal vest, her hair pinned back loosely today. In the months since Margaret's death, the softness that once made strangers underestimate her had not disappeared. It had been refined into something harder to read. "Coalbridge?" she asked. "Liquidation complete. Remaining debt resolved through the estate and insurance recoveries where applicable. The enforcement file is closed. The foundation transfer of your personal shares and the charitable allocations have all been approved." Rebecca hesitated. Evelyn looked at her. "There's one more thing," Rebecca said. "Nathan sent a letter through his attorney. He asked that it be delivered to you personally." She placed a plain white envelope on the desk. Evelyn looked at it. Once, a letter from Nathan would have made her heart move before her mind. Once she might have read it slowly, searching for remorse, apology, explanation, anything she could use to make the pain less senseless. Now she only saw paper. She picked up the envelope and the antique letter opener on her desk. Rebecca's face softened. "You don't have to read it." "I know." Evelyn did not open it. She cut the envelope cleanly in half, letter and all, then fed both pieces into the shredder beside her desk. The machine hummed, brief and efficient. When it stopped, she said, "Anything else?" Rebecca shook her head. "Arthur wants confirmation on the New York summit next week, and Dubai the week after. He also asked if you still intend to visit the Medical Foundation site in Kenya this quarter." "Yes to all 3. "You're sure you don't want to rest?" Evelyn turned toward the window. Sunlight broke through the clouds and scattered silver over the lake. "Resting is not the same as going backward," she said. "I'm not going backward." Rebecca smiled faintly. Your mother would have liked that answer. For a moment the room became very quiet. Evelyn touched the watch on her wrist, Margaret's watch, small and old-fashioned and worth far less than the memories attached to it. "She would have corrected my phrasing," Evelyn said. Rebecca laughed once, softly, and left her alone. Evelyn stood by the window for a long time. Grief had changed since the hospital. It no longer arrived as a wave that took her breath. It had become a room inside her, furnished with memory, pain, gratitude, and unfinished conversations. Some days she could close the door. Other days she sat inside it. But it no longer controlled the entire house. Margaret had given her more than wealth. She had given her a map of power, a tolerance for silence, and the discipline to wait until action mattered. Evelyn had wasted years trying to be loved without being known. She would not waste the rest of her life apologizing for being formidable. Her desk phone lit. "Ms. Whitmore," her assistant said, "Strategic Investments is ready for the Southeast Asia Infrastructure Review. They're asking whether you want the full risk report or the short version." Evelyn looked once more at the mountains. "Full," she said. "Always full." 3 months later, in New York, Evelyn stepped onto the main stage of the Global Investment Forum beneath a wash of white light. The room was filled with people who measured confidence in basis points and weakness in eye contact. Sovereign wealth representatives, pension fund chiefs, private equity titans, family office heirs, policy advisors, former ministers, founders who had turned liquidity events into myth. They watched Evelyn with curiosity sharpened by skepticism. She was young for the role. She was also Margaret Whitmore's daughter. Rumor had preceded her. Some had heard she had destroyed her husband in a week. Some believed the story exaggerated. Some thought she was a grieving heiress temporarily occupying her mother's chair, until the older men around her took control. Evelyn gave them 40 minutes to revise their assumptions. She spoke about the restructuring of global supply chains, the future of cross-border energy corridors, the social cost of underbuilt infrastructure, and the difference between capital that chases headlines and capital that compounds influence. She cited numbers without looking down. She challenged fashionable consensus without sounding performative. She made 3 jokes, all dry enough that the room laughed half a second late. By the time she finished, the applause was not polite. It was interested. Afterward, the crowd came for her in layers. Old money with careful smiles. New money with louder ones. Government envoys. Fund managers. Men who had expected to patronize her, and discovered they needed to pitch her instead. Evelyn handled them with ease. Warm when useful. Distant when necessary. Exact always. Ms. Whitmore, said Adrian Tan, chairman of a Singapore investment group with deep roots in Southeast Asia. Your comments on port resilience were unusually direct. I'd like to continue that conversation. So would I, Evelyn said. Have your office send my team your availability. If the numbers support the ambition, we'll talk seriously. He smiled. That sounds like your mother. I've been told. Not entirely, he said. You're less patient. Evelyn's smile turned real for the first time that evening. Only with waste. Across the reception hall, a European fund had approached with champagne, and an invitation to dinner disguised as a discussion of Nordic climate technology. Evelyn declined without insult and redirected him to her team. She had learned that power did not require rudeness. It required boundaries that did not tremble. The forum lasted 3 days. Evelyn signed preliminary agreements, reopened dormant negotiations, and made it clear to every serious person in the room that Whitmore Global was not in a period of mourning weakness. It was entering a new phase. On the final evening, she returned alone to her hotel suite high above Manhattan. The city spread beneath her in brilliant grids of gold and white. Taxis moved like sparks. The river held pieces of the skyline in dark water. Somewhere below, millions of lives collided and separated, each convinced its emergency was the center of the world. Her phone rang. Rebecca. Everything is officially closed, the lawyer said. The final enforcement notifications came through. Nathan and Scarlett have been transferred to their respective facilities. Tax penalties and corporate cleanup are complete. No open legal thread remains that requires your attention. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Not relief exactly. Completion. Thank you, Rebecca. For all of it. You're welcome. Arthur also wants to confirm Dubai next month, and the Kenya site visit after that. Keep both. Tell him Whitmore's next chapter won't be written from behind a desk. After the call, Evelyn set the phone down and stood barefoot at the window. Once she had believed the best life she could choose was a quiet one beside a man building his dream. She did not regret wanting that. Wanting tenderness had never been the mistake. The mistake had been offering tenderness to someone who thought it made her powerless. Nathan Cole was no longer a wound. He was a closed file, a cautionary footnote in the history of a woman who had learned too late, then acted just in time. Margaret was gone but not absent. She was in the watch on Evelyn's wrist, in the clauses that saved the company, in the discipline that had turned heartbreak into strategy, in the voice that still said, "Do not make yourself small." Evelyn looked out over New York, the city glittering with appetite and possibility. Her life had not ended in a sealed lobby, a hospital hallway, or a courtroom. It had begun again there. And this time she would not live as anyone's shadow. She was Evelyn Whitmore, daughter of Margaret Whitmore, chair of Whitmore Global. Not a betrayed wife waiting for an apology. Not a hidden heiress asking permission to stand in her own name. The world outside the glass was vast, difficult, and bright. At last it was hers to enter.